So I would like to start today. So just the topic of conversation is just so I make sure we're all on the right Zoom, making meaning together, creating memory markers for faith moments. So thumbs up if you're where you think you're supposed to be. Um, I like to describe memory markers as a tool in our toolbox that help us stay connected to God and to each other. In my work, listening with children, and as that's shared in my book, Holy Work with Children, there's a whole chapter on the tools that children use to connect to God, to connect to others, and to connect to the world. And so, memory markers are just one of those tools. I we emailed Kathy. I don't know if y'all received it or not. We scanned the section of the chapter that talks about this. So if you want a little bit more information, we have that for you, or thank you. You can always check out my book as well. But just to give you a little bit of context where this is coming from. And I'll be telling children's stories as we go along about where this all came from. So I thought that we would get started first I'm going to first share my screen if that's okay. Let's make sure I have those privileges. If I can find my mouse, that's always the question. For those who jumped on late or who are watching the recording, there's my name and email. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about how your response for this. But I invite you to consider, and then I'll invite you to share as you feel called. In 1 to 2 sentences, so short, 1 to 2 sentences, describe a moment when you experienced God. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about how you would describe a moment when you experienced God in 1 to 2 sentences. Take about 30 seconds. Take about 15 more. All right. And now I'm going to stop sharing so we can all see one another again. And I'm going to invite those of you who feel called to either put it in the chat box, or if you are feeling vocal this morning, if you would like to unmute and share your experience in 1 to 2 sentences. Let's see how short we can get these stories.
Okay, I will go.
Awesome.
1 to 2 sentences.
Yes.
Emergency surgery, and I felt God's presence in the people that surrounded me in that moment.
Awesome. Thank you. Others.
To me, it's always in nature. When I go for walks, that's one of my favorite things to do, to look at all the beautiful nature around. That's important.
You're good. Thank you. It's in the chat box too. Thank you. Others. I'm gonna grab a piece of paper while y'all think.
Every Sunday at the beginning of worship, when our music and worship leader begins to play his prelude, you can just feel the Spirit of God wash over you and just feel set and grounded and ready for worship.
Thank you, Carrie. One more. Anyone else? Somebody, Laura put when everyone is singing together in worship. Anyone else? I'm going to share several moving forward from kids, but One child similar to y'all once said, I feel God when I'm in the sanctuary listening to my grandmother play the organ. What do you hear in those stories? What commonalities, what differences?
There's a lot of
Wonder, awe.
community.
Wonder and awe,
Mhm.
mention of community, people gathering together. Singing, music, nature, experiences like surgery.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood the assignment. I was
I-
thinking you meant like a specific time when you felt God's presence, but to speak to that in God's people, when I'm part of someone surrounding or when others are surrounding me.
Yeah. No, you did not misunderstand the assignment. You did it beautifully. Um, what you all are naming, and there's a reason I had you do it short. I would love to sit over coffee and hear like what really forms these memories is because when we tell our stories often, unless we're given a lot of space and time, we use symbols, objects, location, people, times, specific experiences to name what was happening and to bring us back and to describe where we were, what we were doing, what we remember seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing that takes us back to that moment that then connects us back to that experience we had with God. And I deeply believe, Kate, that we have those moments in trauma, that we have those moments in celebration, that we have those moments throughout our life when we're paying attention. And when somebody asks us the question and we connect back, when did I experience God? And then we tell our story. We remember experiencing God by pointing to these, what I call memory markers. And so we're going to talk about those today, and we're going to talk about how children use them. But first, I want to give us a little background to how I got to this understanding. It's not anything that's going to, I don't think that's like tell people a lot of the things that I've learned and that I share is not rocket science. It's not something that's going to feel extremely new, I don't think, but it may be putting language around something that you've already witnessed, observed, or known to be true. And so I am going to share my screen and I'm going to invite us into, I'm only going to show you 7.5 minutes of this video, but I am going to invite you into a prayerful reflection, listening and watching and experiencing scripture together through the first 7.5 minutes of a Godly Play story. Is there anyone not familiar with Godly Play? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And in a minute, I'm going to mute myself, but I'm going to ask for a thumbs up that you're able to see and hear the video because that's important.
This is the story of the great family. And this story takes place in the desert.
We don't want to listen to it on double speed. You can tell I was trying to find my place last night when I was rewatching it. I don't think Jerome Berryman would appreciate that. Okay. Let's back it up.
This is the story of the great family. And this story takes place in the desert. So we have a little piece of the desert in our Godly Playroom. Because many of the stories of the people of God take place in the desert. It's not the whole desert, but it is a piece of the desert. Now, the desert is a dangerous place. There's not much water in the desert, and so it's hard for plants and animals to survive. People need water and food to live. During the day, it can be very hot in the desert. But at night, it can get quite cool. When the wind blows, the sand can sting your skin. So you often see people wear special clothes in the desert. The wind also changes the shape of the desert. And so it's easy to lose your way. People don't go into the desert unless they have to. After the great flood, the creatures spread out in the 4 directions to fill up the earth again with life. Animals and people gathered near water. There were 2 great rivers in that place. People began to gather in villages and then towns and cities. One of the important cities of that time was Ur, and another was Haran. Now, the people in Ur believed that there were many gods. There was a god for every plant, a god for every animal, a god of the wind, a god of the rain, a god of the moon, of the stars, of the sun. The world was alive with gods. But there was one family in Ur who believed that there was one God and that all of God was in everything. They didn't know if this was true, but that is what they believed. And in this family, there was Abram and Sarai. The time came for the family to move from Ur to Haran. They didn't know if God would be with them in this new place, but they set out on their journey. There were many people in the family, old people and children, many helpers. They brought their animals too. They followed the great river Euphrates by day, and at night they would camp along its banks. The river showed them the way and gave them water to drink. It was a long journey. They knew they were getting close when they began to meet other travelers on the road. Finally, they arrived. Now, sometimes, especially at night, Abram liked to walk out into the desert, and he would look out at all of the grains of sand and look up at all the stars in the sky. And God would come close, and Abram would feel so close to God. Abram knew what God wanted him to do. God wanted him to leave Haran and to journey on. And so they packed up all of their belongings, their animals and their helpers. Not all of the family went this time, but Abram's brother's son Lot went with them. They headed west toward Canaan. This time there was no river to show them the way or to give them water to drink. Outside of Shechem, they climbed a hill and they prayed to God. And they knew that God was in this place. And so they built an altar to mark that God was in this place and to give thanks to God for being with them on their journey. But this was not where God wanted them to stay. And so they journeyed on.
Did that stop sharing, or can you still see my screen? So when I first told this story, when I was doing my research for my dissertation, when I was in Chicago, I was working on my PhD and I was doing my research, which was listening to children. I told this story in two different circles of children. I had two different research locations. One was a what I called neighborhood church, a church within a neighborhood in Chicago. Kids could walk to that church from their home. Their school was close by. I oftentimes saw those children at a grocery store near me because I lived there in that neighborhood as well. United Methodist after school program. Then the other location where I created a circle of children was at a large church downtown Chicago, which most of those children attended there. I did it during Sunday school, and most of those children had been United Methodist their entire lives. So here I am in two different locations telling this story. And in the neighborhood church, as I was telling this story, I remember, I don't know if y'all have these days, but I'm sitting in this circle of children and it's after school program. So you can think about everything that they've already done that day. We did give them a snack first. And, I'm getting different, what seems to me like different levels of participation and attention. And I look over and this is a long story. Like y'all just heard, Abram and Sarai are just getting started. And I look up and there's this little girl and she's not just laying down, she's spinning around. I mean, maybe you've met one of these children. My son would probably have been doing the same, spin, spin, spin. And you think like, oh my goodness, this is a wash. It's just, she's not going to hear anything that's in this story for her today. And just trying to have grace for myself. And so then when it came time, so we followed the rhythm of godly play pretty closely. And so after telling the story, we wondered together. And again, she's kind of just, doing her own thing, which is completely okay with me. And I send them off to do their work. And share this now, grabs a bucket of Legos. I'm like, huh, curious. We'll see, what she builds. And I come to her close to the end of work time. I just kind of let her do her thing. And I'm walking around, and again, this was a research project, so I did more asking than I normally would because I was trying to collect data. And so I sat down next to her, and she had created this big Lego scene. And I said to her, I wonder how this reminds you of the story of Abram and Sarai. And she looks at me like I'm completely stupid. And she goes, Pastor Tanya, it's the story. I said, well, what do you mean? Tell me more. And she's like, well, this is where Abram and Sarah started. This is the river. They walked down the river, and she remembered all the different cities. And then when she got to the place, she's like, and Abram went out and he talked to God. Like, she's telling me this whole story, probably better than I told it. And she goes, and God came so close to Abram that Abram knew what God was saying, and Abram came so close to God. And she goes, and she pointed to a pile of Legos that looks like this picture and said, and Abram marked where he talked to God. And she said, and so then she pointed to several of these, because if I had shared with you the rest of the story, we know Abram and Sarai continue their journey. And in the Godly Play story, Abram continues to go out to talk to God, and he always marks where he talks to God with 3 stones. And she said, these are the Abram's markings, the places where Abram experienced God. And it became very clear to me how she was remembering these very important moments of the stories through the markers. So fast forward a couple days, I head to my next location. I'm like, well, I'll be curious to see what happens with this time. And I had a little boy in that circle. When I asked him, I said, I wonder what your favorite part of the story was. And he said, when Abram talked to God. I said, I really like that part too. I wonder where you are in this story. And he said, well, sometimes God talks to me too. And so we had some conversation about that. And I said, I wonder how you experience God in this story. And he pointed to, because I still had the story out, he pointed to the piles of rocks, and he said, in the places where the stampers are. And I said, the stampers? And he said, when Abram marked where he talked to God. And it was in those 2 circles telling this story that I started paying attention and started thinking about how do children mark or stamp the moments when we experience God in a way that perhaps if we come back, if Abraham at that point had come back, would he have found those rocks and would he have remembered? And so that's kind of the those moments that really opened up what we know about childhood development. And what we know is that children, I think all people, but we're talking about children today, develop language, develop understanding, develop communication skills, make meaning using symbols, places, objects, things that they can see, hear, smell, touch, remember. For example, I had a little girl when I always asked them when they came back each week. We always started around the circle while I was waiting to actually begin, the getting ready time, where I think I think God really works in the getting ready time more than anything sometimes. And so we were sitting around having conversation, and I always ask them, I wonder how you experience God this week. And because I saw him every week. And so one little girl said, I went to my grandmother's farm and I experienced God in the swing at my grandparents' farm. And I said to her, you know what? I hope that as long as you can, whenever you can, when you find yourself in that swing, that you'll remember that God is with you. And she goes, yeah, I think I hope that too. And so I started working with using the stampers or the memory markers that they give to me in telling their story back in a way that I hoped and prayed would help them remember and help what we know in development and brain development, those synapses to fire in a way that they connect and make a memory. That's the simple version of what happens in our brains. But in a way that that child would hold on to that memory, and whether she was back at the farm and could see the grass, could smell whatever the smells were at her grandparents' farm, found herself sitting in the swing, that she would be taken back to that moment and say, oh yeah, I remember, right? And so with that, I I want to name that children make meaning every time they return to the marker and remember God's promise and love. That's the hope. That's the prayer that we are creating memories. We're honoring their experiences with the holy in a way that they claim it, they respond to it. And when life is really hard or when life is really good, they remember that God was with them in that moment. Whether that moment brings back happy or sad or hard, they can remember God was with me. Memory markers, another way to understand them is they're like putting a stake in the ground. I experience God here, or laying out breadcrumbs so that children can remember where they were, what they felt, who was there, right? When y'all were telling your stories, y'all talked about people and about community, what was happening, and how God was present. I think this is really important for adults too. I just want to name that. This is something that you can do intergenerationally. I'm thinking about your story, Kate. And I was in the hospital for my daughter for a long time. And that was probably one of the most traumatic things that has happened to me in my life. And I know that people were really intentional in the prayers that they were sending me, the things that they were sending me. And I still have to this day a prayer that somebody sent me, very short, that I screenshotted, that I kept on my phone as cover art. And every now and then it pops up because my photos rotate on my phone. And when it pops up, I take a deep breath. First, I remember the trauma, right? And then I remember the person who sent that to me and the promise that was within it. So I want to name that sometimes memory markers can come out of positive experiences. They can also come out of not so positive experiences, but it helps sometimes with the healing as well, and helps children with healing as well. So so just naming again that children use symbols, images to connect to their feelings and to their experiences in their faith journey. And so I'm sure all of y'all have like really great ideas. I'm really excited. But just to kind of put some pictures to what I'm talking about, you can see my son walking into first grade. I think this is his first grade picture this year. And if you look really, really closely at his backpack, you'll see a little tag hanging from it. And then I tried to zoom in on it, and you can see that says FUMC. That's from his church. And that was given to him at Blessing Backpack Sunday worship service. How many of y'all do this? So this is one way that you can use, this is one example of a memory marker. When you hold a holy space and you bless a child or you celebrate a milestone, and you give them something to remember that moment that they take with them. Now, I always want to say that the marker isn't magic, and I tell children that all the time. This is not magic. Um, but what it is it's a tool to help us remember what God has, is, and will do in our lives. So my daughter, I was trying to find a picture of it and I didn't have it, but my daughter has on, my daughter's two, or almost three. She has a little bitty backpack, her first backpack, and she calls it her pack, my pack. She got a blessing tag as well. And the other day, I found a picture of her diaper bag, bottle bag from when she was little, but now she has her own pack. And she went the other day and she picked up the pack and she looked at the tag and she says, "My church." I said, "Yeah, your church gave you that. Loves me." They do. They do. Right? Your church loves you. God loves you. We love you. You are so loved. Right? Just from a little piece of paper. So it's not anything we spend a lot of money on. I mean, you can. It's not anything that's magic. But it's a way to mark what is happening in a child or a person's life. And I say person because if you look at the far right corner, that's the diaper bag that I carry around for kids that I go to worship with, has all of my fun children in worship things. We can talk about that another day. But on it, you'll see that little, it's a carabiner with the brown ribbon that says Sacred Roots and has an acorn on it. I can tell you more about this ministry later, but we sent these out to parents with a card, and churches sent these out to parents with a card that says, "God loves you. You've got this. Whenever you see Oakley, who's the acorn, remember you are not alone." So I carry that. And so whenever I see that, it's simple. Whenever I see that brown ribbon, it's attached to my headphones now. I remember I've got this. God is with me. And so it's just a little simple memory jog to pull you out of whatever's happening that day. I've seen this done as yard signs. Anybody have churches that do yard sign campaigns where you put yard signs? I have one in my yard right now that says hashtag be love. And I often wonder, like when I come in my house and when I come out of my house, that sign reminds me of something. And I remember when I picked it up at my church and all the things. I often wonder what it means to people driving by who don't know my church or haven't been to my church. But that's something. It works for multiple purposes, but it can be a memory marker for the people living in that house. Shower tags. I have a shower tag right now in my shower that I got at Church of the Resurrection many years ago. I don't even remember when, but on the front it says, "Remember, as you wash, remember your baptism and remember you're loved." Simple. Like I didn't even get that when I was baptized, but when I was given it, there was conversation about it. You remembered your baptism, all the things, and then they gave you the tag and it was like, okay, now, whenever you're in the shower, remember your baptism. So I really like that one too. But again, it's simple. Memory markers help children claim their God story. Where were you? Who were you with? What were you doing? What do you want to remember? How can we remember together? I put this picture of the hymnal in here because the hymnal really is that for me. I pick up a hymnal, and right now, some people I work for the conference office. I should have said this. I work for the Rio, Texas conference office in San Antonio, and somebody dropped off a whole bunch of really old United Methodist hymnals, and they're in a closet. And I went in because I was looking for something specifically. And like just picking it up and turning the pages and the smell, it was like whoosh. I was back in my childhood church, right? So hymnals for me. But they really can be anything. And they help us also retell the story and help children claim their story, but then help us teach them how to retell their story. So using these questions, where were you? Who were you with? What were you doing? What do you want to remember? How can we remember together? we can listen to them, we can tell their story back to them, make sure we got it right, and then help them find something to help them remember. My son, several years ago, we discovered that he is neurodivergent, and we were having a really, really hard time. And one of the things we discovered was that I love his smile. But one of the things that we discovered is that he has a really hard time with transitions and saying goodbye. Anybody else? And so maybe you have these children in your communities. 100% invested and don't pull me out until I'm ready because I don't want to go. And so I didn't even think about this. You know, my husband laughs because he's like, you have all these degrees in this. I'm like, yeah, but I've never done this as a parent before. And sometimes I don't think about it until it's like too late. And so we were leaving a beach trip when he was about 3, full on meltdown, full on. And I had no idea, you know, and I'm just addressing the behavior. I need you to get in the car. We've got to go home. We've got a 5.5 hour drive. You've got to be in your car seat, right? Like I'm like in it, tunnel vision. And it was a really hard hour. And as we were driving home, I realized, I was like, I think he was having a hard time with leaving. And it was his teacher who gifted us with, because I was talking to her about it and because she asked how our vacation was. I said it was great until we had to come home. But she gifted him with these plastic jars. They're like mason jars. And she didn't even talk to me. She looked at him and said, Luke, next time you go to a special place, take this jar so that you can bring some of that special place back with you and you can remember. And I went, brilliant, brilliant. And so now every time we go to a special place, which is often the beach, we take a jar and you can see him here, 2 different trips. And we talk about saying goodbye and getting ready to say goodbye. But we help him put sand and ocean water and all the seashells he collected, and we bring it home. And what I've learned to say to him is this: you were at the beach with your feet in the sand. You picked up shells and you felt happy and loved. Let's remember this together. And so telling his story back. So now these are on shelves in his room. When we're going to bed, sometimes he'll randomly just point to them and say, remember when we went to the beach? Yeah, I do, buddy. I want to do that again. Okay, let's do that again. It's another way to help children practice telling their story and help us engage in conversation with them as well. The bottom one is just at the bottom 3 lines is just a prayer that sometimes I say to children when I know their stories. And I can say, so in this moment, let me back up. So the bottom 3 lines really are, and then what I say to myself when a child is telling me a story and I'm helping them remember, or I'm marking them like with the baptism blessing or whatever, remember your baptism, whatever the liturgy is. I'll say in my brain, God, when this child is sad, help them remember your love is with them. Like you can pray for them through these moments as well. So I'm going to stop there. That's a lot. And I just want to give you about those internal processors. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. It's going to feel long if you're not an introvert or an internal processor, to just write down and just what caught your attention, what ideas are you having, where are you already doing this, where are some possibilities.